Hey guys, this is going to be a quick video spurred on by the recent post by Britney Spears, which you can tell she's quite angry. She's having a lot of these kind of outbursts where she's calling people out, and understandably so, because as she goes through the stages of recovery, she's obviously getting a bit more kind of confident in what she can say and how she says it. But this video is going to focus more on the possible reasons as to why she's gotten to this point, i.e., her parents and more specifically her dad. So this video is going to focus on the examples of narcissistic behaviors or character traits that have been exhibited by him in the past, which may indicate he is somewhere on the narcissistic spectrum. So when you look up articles online that will say, 10 signs of a narcissistic parent or 6 signs, blah, 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 they'll all usually say different things, but there's usually an overriding theme throughout all of them where they touch on the same type of character traits or examples of what the behavior looked like. So I've just picked out a couple and based them around examples that I know that he has exhibited. So the first example of a character trait or behavior of a narcissistic parent is a codependency or dependency upon the child. So obviously it's normal as, when kids grow up that parents might expect that the child will take care of them mentally, financially, whatever. However, the difference with a narcissistic parent is that they will manipulate their child into making really big sacrifices in their lives without any real regard as to the child's, or at that point the adult child's, wants or needs or priorities in their life. That doesn't matter anymore as long as the adult's needs have been met. I thought this was a good example because it's obviously glaringly obvious that her dad, Jamie, has made millions from the conservatorship and being the conservator. And he said quite often that he felt at the time that he was the most appropriate person to be in that role, conveniently the person that would be getting millions year upon year from being the conservator, and remained so even after she had requested to have him removed. It took quite a while for him to actually stop being the conservator. And throughout all of this, we obviously know how unhappy Britney was, how her mental and physical health, well-being, all of the rest of it was good enough for her to go on tours, etc., but not good enough for her to not have a conservatorship, which is obviously kind of insane. So we could speculate that he possibly believed that he had a right to be there, that he had a right to take that money from her year upon year. He had a right to be the conservator and nobody else could be it, and that he had a right to her money in that way. The next character trait or behavior that a narcissistic parent may exhibit is possessiveness. This is pretty obvious with Britney because it came out that he had actually been recording her illegally, of course, and had, devices in her room and around her house, which is a massive invasion of privacy. But the fact that he thought that he had the right to do that to her just because she was his daughter and he was her dad, that he thought he could do that, just shows the level of possessiveness that he had over her. And by that, I mean that he possibly viewed her as an extension of himself, that she wasn't her own, person, her own human being, that she was just another version of him, an extension of him. So he had the right to control her in that way, i.e. by recording her. And alongside possessiveness, which I think could be the reason as to why he started recording her, along with the fact that he would probably lose, this massive financial income that he was getting, was also because she was becoming more and more independent and possibly starting to speak out. And that was a threat to his control. So the way that he tried to rectify that was to survey her a lot more, to know exactly what was happening, to essentially just control her, because her increasing independence and her state of mind and well-being at that point was pretty good, considering all the tours and all that stuff that she had done. That to him, I'm sure, was a perceived threat. So he was starting to really worry about what she was probably doing behind the scenes. So he needed to control, needed to see what was going on. And by doing all of that again, and by recording her, that is, it just goes to show that he thought of her as a possession versus as an actual human being and someone, as a father, who was worried about her emotional well-being and physical well-being and all of the rest of it, being in a conservatorship that it didn't seem appropriate that she was in anymore. The next narcissistic behavior or trait is a lack of empathy or apathy. And in this case, I mean, you can even use the example of recording her again. That just goes to show such a massive lack of empathy that he can't understand or doesn't care to understand or is incapable of understanding how a person, his own daughter, would think or feel about being recorded in such a personal context in her own bedroom as an adult woman, that was just completely disregarded. And then, of course, for years that she felt that it wasn't appropriate that she was in the conservatorship. And of course, that was just disregarded and she was shut down. And then also the example of when she didn't want to do a dance move and then she was all of a sudden put on, like, lithium, I think it was, medication and sent off to some sort of facility. Like, all of those behaviors clearly show that he isn't seeing her as a person that has feelings and emotions. Again, he's just seeing her as a possession, as an extension of himself, a physical item that he can just control. Another example of a narcissistic trait or behavior is the kind of grandiosity that these people tend to have. And I thought a good example of that was in one of the court hearings that I had read the transcripts of. He had said that he should be getting thanked for being the conservator and for putting this in place. And yeah, it was just outrageous. Like, the grandiosity and the superiority, it was just like so extreme. And when you consider that this is something that has clearly caused Britney so much pain and suffering over such a vast number of years, even if you make the argument that maybe the conservatorship was appropriate for the first 2 or 3 years until she kind of got back on her feet, even if you make that argument, there's still, the 10 years after that where she was off doing tours, where clearly she didn't need to be in a conservatorship anymore, and that should have been looked at, or she should have been gradually getting back control of her finances and etc., all of that sort of stuff. And then for him to turn around and say that he should be getting thanked for being the conservator for all of this period of time, inclusive of the time where she clearly didn't need to be in a conservatorship, just goes to show the level of just complete, ignorance, grandiosity, superiority. And that was a pretty good example of that. And lastly, marginalization. So this was a good one in terms of an example for Brittany and her dad, because marginalization is often used by the narcissistic parent if they're challenged by their child's success, by their child's confidence, by their child's direction in life. So a narcissistic parent can often make strides to ensure that they, the parent, remain superior and the child is the one that remains down low, inferior. So by proxy of the conservatorship and it being abusive, this was the ultimate level of superiority for him, that he could control Brittany in this way, continuously invalidating her feelings, her thoughts, putting her down in various ways, even as something as simple as not being able to let her choose a dance move, which is an example of him using completely unreasonable judgment and critiquing her in ways that were just ridiculous. It just wasn't fair. And throughout the conservatorship, it can be seen that he often used just ridiculous judgment, unreasonable, unfair judgment towards Brittany in various different ways, which again promoted her to be marginalized from other people in society and for him to maintain his superiority over her inferiority. So as I said before, guys, there's loads of other character traits and possible behaviors that a narcissistic parent or person could exhibit. These are just a few that I pulled that I thought, there'd be good examples for. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you found it interesting. Bye!